He was left alone in the sky, where even two are considered a risk. Against him were dozens of enemy fighters, and no guarantee that anyone would come to his aid. For 30 minutes, James Howard made decisions that changed not only the course of the battle, but also his own fate. At 25,000 feet, the air is stable and dry. The temperature outside is far below freezing. Inside the P-51 Mustang, the sound of the Merlin engine is steady at cruise power. Manifold pressure is controlled. Cylinder head temperature within limits. The aircraft is trimmed for level flight. Below, the B-17 formation moves on a fixed heading. The bombers are arranged in staggered combat boxes. Approximately 1,000 to 1,500 yards separate the larger groupings. Within each box, aircraft maintain intervals of roughly 200 yards laterally and slightly less in vertical spacing. The structure allows overlapping fields of defensive fire from nose, dorsal, waist, and tail guns. Major James H. Howard holds position about 1,000 feet above the lead elements. He remains slightly aft of center line to maintain a clear view forward and to both flanks. His mission is to keep the B-17 bomber formation intact long enough for them to exit the most dangerous sector of German airspace. It is January 1944. The formation is well inside German territory. The weather provides high visibility above broken cloud layers. Contrails mark the altitude band clearly. For several minutes, no enemy aircraft are visible. Howard scans the upper sectors in slow arcs. Then he detects movement at extreme range, small shapes forming at high altitude. They are not isolated. They are assembling. He counts quickly. More than 20 aircraft in the first visible group. Additional elements forming behind them. The silhouettes become identifiable as BF-109 and FW-190 fighters. He checks for friendly cover. Blue section, this is Howard. Report your position. After a pause, a response comes through interference. Engaged south of your location, multiple bandits, unable to reposition immediately. Howard acknowledges. Understood. The German fighters begin to separate into attack elements. One group climbs higher, positioning for diving passes. Another shifts laterally for head-on approaches. The intent appears coordinated. Howard reviews his fuel status. Consumption at altitude is manageable, but high-power maneuvering will increase burn rate significantly. The remaining fuel is sufficient for the escort leg and return, assuming no extended pursuit. He considers two options. He can dive aggressively into the nearest group and attempt to disrupt them early, which would involve chasing individual aircraft away from the formation, or he can maintain altitude directly above the bombers and intercept each attack as it develops. If he descends and becomes separated, the top of the bomber formation will be unprotected. He maintains altitude. The first German element commits to a dive from approximately 2,000 feet above his position. Distance decreases rapidly. Lead box, bandits high 12. Howard transmits, maintain formation. At approximately 400 yards, he turns to intercept the lead diving fighter. At 300 yards, he fires a short burst from his 6.50 caliber machine guns. The tracers pass slightly ahead of the target. The German aircraft rolls off its dive and breaks left before reaching effective firing range on the bombers. Howard does not pursue. He climbs immediately back to a position above the formation. A second pair approaches from the right flank. Right side guns are tracking. A bomber gunner reports. Keep tight spacing. Howard replies. Do not break. He crosses in front of the incoming fighters at roughly 350 yards and fires another controlled burst. One aircraft breaks early. The other continues briefly before pulling up under defensive fire from the bombers. Within seconds, two FW-190s approach from below his altitude. One fires during a crossing pass. The engagement lasts approximately 3 seconds. Howard hears impacts against the fuselage. Instrument readings remain normal. He does not descend. Instead, he reestablishes altitude advantage and scans again. Enemy fighters continue to assemble above and ahead of the formation. The number now visible exceeds 30. Some maintain distance while others prepare to dive in sequence. Howard monitors ammunition. He fires only within 300 yards to conserve rounds. Each burst is limited to 1 to 2 seconds. Fuel quantity continues to decrease gradually. The bomber formation below shows minor spacing adjustments under pressure, but remains intact. No aircraft have visibly broken away. Howard searches the sky once more for additional Allied fighters. None are in immediate proximity. Howard to blue section. Any update? Still engaged. Negative ability to assist. He acknowledges without further comment. The tactical situation is now clear. The German force retains numerical superiority. The bomber formation depends on continuous top cover to prevent concentrated diving attacks. Howard stabilizes his aircraft 1,000 feet above the lead box and prepares to intercept the next wave. He understands that for the moment, he is the only Allied fighter directly above the formation. Additional enemy aircraft are maneuvering into position. The first wave commits without hesitation. From 2,000 feet above, a line of Bf-109s rolls inverted and drops through the sun. At the same time, FW-190s form wide and low, aligning for frontal passes against the lead B-17 box. The attack is layered, timed to force simultaneous defensive fire. Howard pushes the throttle forward and banks left into the descending group. G-forces build immediately, 3, then 4, as he pulls the nose up to meet the dive. The Mustang tightens under him. Vision narrows slightly at the edges. Bandits diving now. A tail gunner calls. "Hold your course," Howard answers. "Keep it steady." At 800 yards, the leading 109 grows rapidly in his windscreen. At 500, he corrects a foreclosure. At 350 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The 6.50 caliber guns erupt in a hard metallic vibration. The sound is sharp and continuous, a tearing buzz that lasts no more than 2 seconds. Tracers reach forward in bright lines. The German pilot brakes early, smoke trailing faintly from the engine cowling. Howard tracks him for a fraction of a second, long enough to confirm disruption, then releases the trigger and pulls up. He does not follow. Below, the frontal attackers are already committing. 2 FW-190s approach the lead B-17 head-on at high speed. The bomber's nose guns flash in response. The closure rate is extreme. Seconds decide the outcome. Howard rolls and dives across their approach path. The G-force shifts negative briefly as he pushes over, then climbs again into positive load as he corrects. He fires at 400 yards, a controlled burst of roughly 1.5 seconds. One of the FW-190s snaps into a hard roll and breaks off before reaching effective firing range. The second continues, firing into the formation. A B-17 in the upper left element jolts under impact. Smoke begins to stream from an engine. Lead box hit. Engine 3 smoking. A radio voice reports. Tight but controlled. Maintain position. Howard replies. Feather if required. Stay in the box. He feels the instinct to dive after the damaged 190 that just passed beneath him. The aircraft is trailing thin gray smoke, losing speed, an easy pursuit. A probable kill. But the remaining German fighters are not disengaging. Several are climbing again, reforming above the bombers. They are trying to draw me down. If he descends to finish the damaged fighter, he will lose altitude advantage. The next diving wave will have clear access to the formation. He levels out at 1,000 feet above the bombers once more. The second diving group comes in tighter than the first, at least 8 aircraft, staggered in pairs. The sky fills with crossing contrails and flashing gunfire. Howard turns hard right to intercept the leading pair. 5 Gs press him into the seat. The Mustang shudders slightly in compressed air. He lines up the first attacker at 300 yards and fires a 2-second burst. The .50 caliber recoil vibrates through the airframe. The 109 pitches up, bombarding, overshooting its dive. Its wingtip passes close, too close. For an instant, the 2 aircraft are separated by no more than 50 yards. Howard rolls away to avoid collision. Fragments drift past his canopy, small pieces of metal from either aircraft. He does not check which. Below, the bombers absorb more fire. One ship drops slightly out of alignment before correcting back into position. Defensive guns continue firing in overlapping arcs. Right waist reporting hits. Another voice transmits. Hydraulics holding. Stay locked in, Howard answers. Do not break formation. A third wave forms almost immediately. The number of enemy fighters now visible exceeds 40. Some circle high, waiting for timing. Others make short feints, testing his response. Howard's breathing remains steady, but he checks the fuel gauge again. The needle has moved lower than he prefers. Combat power and repeated climbs are consuming reserve faster than planned. He calculates quickly. Enough for now, not enough for waste. A pair of 109s feints toward the left flank. Howard banks toward them, and they pull away sharply, climbing. At the same moment, 4 FW-190s dive from directly above the center box. He recognizes the tactic, a diversion. He reverses hard, feeling the G-load spike again, and cuts across the center line at 350 yards. He fires a short, precise burst, less than 2 seconds. One attacker rolls inverted and dives away without firing. The others scatter under bomber gunfire. The pattern repeats. Dive, break, reform. Smoke trails now mark several points in the sky. Some German, some from damaged bombers. The formation holds, but Straumann is visible in spacing and altitude corrections. Howard climbs back into top cover position. Above him, the German fighters are not dispersing. Instead, they are circling wider, consolidating into a denser mass. He watches them align in multiple elements, higher than before. The next assault will be heavier. The sky is not thinning. It is tightening. The sky above the formation is no longer shared space. Howard scans left, right, above the sun line. No friendly contrails, no Mustang silhouettes closing in to reinforce. The radio remains active with bomber traffic, but no escort call signs answer his sector. He is alone over the boxes. German fighters now operate at 3 distinct altitudes. A high group circles nearly 3,000 feet above him. A middle layer hovers level with his position. A lower element sweeps beneath the bombers, climbing into blind arcs between defensive fields of fire. The attacks come without clean intervals. 2 Bf-109s dive from high right. At the same moment, 3 FW-190s approach low from the left, accelerating for oblique passes. Howard rolls into the first pair. 4.5 Gs press him into the seat. His right arm tightens against the control stick. Breath becomes deliberate. He fires at 350 yards. A 2-second burst. The .50 caliber vibration runs through the airframe in a solid mechanical pulse. One attacker breaks sharply upward. The second continues long enough to fire into the bombers before banking away. Below, a B-17 in the rear element absorbs concentrated fire. Its outer engine erupts into flame. Tail box hit. Engine 4 burning. A voice calls. Howard glances down. The bomber drops slightly out of alignment, smoke pouring back in a thick black stream. For a moment it appears ready to fall away from the formation. He has a choice. If he dives now, he can intercept the fighters circling the damaged aircraft. He can buy that crew immediate relief. But above him, the high group is tightening its pattern. They are waiting for him to descend. If I go down, they come through the top. His oxygen mask fogs briefly with condensation as he exhales. He wipes the lower edge with a gloved thumb without looking away from the sky. Another pair of 109s dives from directly above. He pulls hard to meet them. 5 Gs. Vision narrows slightly at the edges. He holds it. Instead of firing immediately, he adjusts his climb angle to place himself directly between the diving fighters and the center of the bomber formation. He forces them to alter course earlier than planned. They break before reaching optimal firing distance. No shots fired. Position over firepower. Below, the burning B-17 crew manages to feather the damaged engine. The flames diminish to heavy smoke. The aircraft struggles but holds formation. Engine contained. The bomber reports, "We're staying in. Maintain altitude." Howard answers. His voice is even. The middle-layer German fighters now begin alternating dives. One element commits while another climbs behind him. For nearly 25 seconds, he remains in continuous defensive maneuvering. Roll left, pull up, reverse right. Short climb, immediate correction. No clean firing solution, only disruption. A 190 flashes across his nose at less than 100 yards. The closure rate is extreme. He banks instinctively, avoiding collision by a narrow margin. The aircraft passes so close, he sees the pilot's helmet turn toward him. Howard checks ammunition counters during a brief climb. He has expended a significant portion. Enough remains, but not for careless bursts. Each trigger pull must matter. Fuel is lower than he prefers. Another attack forms low. The damaged B-17 below begins to lose slight altitude again. German fighters are circling it, probing for isolation. Howard's mind returns to the same calculation. Dive and protect one aircraft, or hold altitude and prevent 10 more from being exposed. For a brief second, doubt surfaces. A single crew below versus the integrity of the formation. He forces the thought aside. The formation must hold. He remains above. He accelerates slightly and repositions 800 feet ahead of the lead box, offset toward the sun. From there, he forces the next diving element to split early. 2 attackers cross each other's paths, losing coordination. He fires one controlled 1.5-second burst at 300 yards. A 109 rolls away trailing light smoke. No pursuit. The sky is increasingly dense with crossing vapor trails. Enemy fighters regroup higher than before, no longer attacking in isolated pairs. They begin spacing themselves wider, some to the front, some to both flanks. Howard watches the geometry change. This is no longer a series of probing dives. They are organizing for something larger. He steadies the Mustang once more above the bombers, breath measured, grip firm, but controlled. The next phase is assembling around him, and he understands that what has happened so far has only been preparation. The German fighters come back in a tighter plan. Now they split the sky into lanes. A high element dives from the sun. A mid-level group approaches from the right in pairs. A low group climbs under the bombers and then pops up into oblique passes where the B-17 guns overlap the least. Howard stays 1,000 feet above the lead box, but he stops reacting to every feint. He is being worked like a lever, forced to turn, climb, turn again, burn fuel and strength, until he cannot hold position. They're trying to exhaust me. A frontal attack forms against the leading B-17 SFW-190S, line up nearly head-on, using speed to minimize exposure. The bomber's nose guns begin firing early, but the closure rate is brutal. Howard sees the line compress in seconds. "Fighters, 12 o'clock. A bomber voice snaps. "Head on." Howard pushes the Mustang forward and dives shallow, not to chase, but to cut across their geometry. Wind noise rises around the canopy. The airframe vibrates as speed builds. He steadies the sight. Gun camera range in his mind. 400 yards is workable. 300 is preferred. 250 is decisive. At 320 yards, he fires a controlled burst, about 2 seconds. The .50 caliber sound is a hard, ripping vibration. Tracers stitch ahead of the lead FW-190. The German fighter jerks out of line and rolls away, the frontal pass spoiled. The second 190 continues, too close to the bombers now. Howard holds his dive one more heartbeat, then fires again at roughly 280 yards, a flash on the enemy aircraft's wing route. The 190 smokes and drops away under the bomber's defensive fire. "Good break," a B-17 gunner calls. He peeled off. Howard does not answer. He is already pulling back up, forcing the Mustang into a climb that makes his arms feel heavier than they should. 4 Gs, then 5. His vision tightens, gray at the edges for a second. He breathes harder through the oxygen mask. Condensation fogs the inside briefly, then clears. Another wave arrives from both flanks. 3 fighters converge on him first, then a 4th appears above, diving steeply. For a moment, his canopy is filled with moving metal and flashing wings. They are not aiming at the bombers in that instant. They are aiming at him. Howard snaps into a defensive break and is immediately committed to continuous maneuvering. Roll left, pull, reverse right, shallow dive, then climb again. 25 seconds becomes 30, with no clean pause. His forearms burn. The Mustang shakes as it crosses disturbed air and wake turbulence from the bomber stream. A burst of enemy fire passes close enough to sound like gravel on the canopy. He feels the aircraft twitch. He keeps it flying. He checks the gauges in a half-second glance. Fuel is now a genuine problem. Not emergency yet, but the margin is shrinking quickly. Ammunition is worse. He has been careful, but the counter is dropping into numbers that make every burst a decision. Howard changes pattern. Instead of turning tightly over the bombers, he uses high-speed slashing passes, short dives to disrupt an attack run, then immediate recovery back to altitude, preserving energy and limiting time exposed to converging fighters. It is not about shooting down every attacker. It is about preventing a clean pass. A BF-109 dives toward the upper left B-17 element, lined up perfectly on a bomber that is already trailing smoke. Howard slices across at speed, crossing the attacker's nose at an angle that forces an early break. No shot fired. The German pilot pulls out too soon, overshoots, and the threatened B-17 survives another 10 seconds, enough to stay inside the formation's protective arcs. Left ships taking it bad. A bomber reports, "We're losing hydraulics." "Stay in the box as long as you can," Howard answers. "Do not drop below." He dives again, faster this time. The wind howl increases. The Mustang shudders slightly, as he approaches compressibility limits for the altitude. At 300 yards, he fires a short burst, 1.5 seconds. The 109 shivers, then trails thicker smoke. It rolls away and disappears downward through the broken clouds. That one is finished, Howard thinks, but he refuses to follow it into the lower layers. He climbs back, jaw tight against the mask, hands steady by discipline more than comfort. Minutes matter now, not victory. Howard looks at the formation and measures time instead of targets. The bombers only need to hold for a few more minutes to clear the worst sector, just long enough for distance and friendly coverage to return. German attacks begin to lose their clean timing. Some fighters break off early. Others make half-committed passes and climb away without pressing. A few disengage entirely, turning back toward home, rather than continue bleeding altitude and fuel in a fight that is no longer producing easy bomber kills. Howard does not feel relief, only fatigue. His arms are heavy. Breathing is loud inside the mask. The fuel needle is still dropping, but the bomber stream beneath him begins gradually to move beyond the densest concentration of interceptors. The spacing steadies. The sky ahead looks marginally less crowded. The sky is quieter, but the cost is not yet known. The German fighters do not leave all at once. They thin gradually. First, the high element stops committing to full dives. Then the mid-level pairs begin turning east instead of reforming. A few make distant, half-hearted passes before breaking away entirely. Within minutes, only scattered aircraft remain at the edge of visibility. Howard holds position above the bombers and does not follow. He watches carefully for a renewed attack. None materializes. The engagement has lasted close to 30 minutes. Not a continuous exchange of fire, but a sustained cycle of interception, disruption, and maneuver. In that time, he has engaged, by his rough estimate, several dozen enemy aircraft, likely more than 40 at various altitudes. He never had the opportunity to count them precisely. He checks his ammunition counters. Low. He has expended the majority of his .50 caliber rounds. Enough remains for brief defensive fire, not for extended combat. Fuel is worse. The gauge shows a narrow margin remaining for safe return across the channel. Combat power settings and repeated climbs have taken their toll. There is no reserve for pursuit. He scans his instrument panel for signs of damage. Oil pressure steady. Temperature within acceptable range. Controls responsive. The Mustang carries small scars, evidence of passing fire, but it is flyable. Below, the B-17 formation begins to settle into a more stable geometry. Smoke trails linger behind several aircraft. One bomber flies with a feathered engine. Another holds slightly lower than its element, but remains in position. A gap exists in the rear of the formation where an aircraft is no longer present. Howard studies that empty space for a moment. He does not know when it fell out, during which pass, under which wave. Red 3 to escort. A bomber voice transmits, "We appreciate the cover." Howard keys the microphone. "Stay tight and maintain course." He replies, "You're clear for now." There is no change in tone, no emphasis. Another voice breaks in, quieter. "You were the only one up there." Howard answers after a short pause, "Just doing the job." He turns his head slowly, surveying the formation from above. From this altitude, the bombers resemble a disciplined grid moving through open sky. Their contrails stretch long and straight behind them. The air now holds only scattered fragments of smoke, thinning with distance. He considers, briefly, whether to pursue the retreating fighters. Several are still visible far ahead, turning back toward their bases. A damaged aircraft might be within reach if he committed full power, but he reviews the mission again. The objective was protection, not destruction. Fuel state makes the decision final. He remains with the bombers. For the first time since the first dive, his shoulders ease slightly. The physical strain recedes into a dull fatigue. His forearms ache from sustained control pressure. His breathing through the oxygen mask steadies to a normal rhythm. He realizes something with mild surprise. He never counted how many attacked him. There was no time for arithmetic in the air, only geometry and reaction. Below, a B-17 signals minor system damage, but confirms continued flight. Another reports a wounded crew member. None report immediate loss of control. The formation continues west. Howard adjusts throttle for economical cruise. He reduces power gradually, watching fuel flow stabilize. The Merlin's note softens to a steadier hum. The coastline will come soon. The channel crossing requires discipline now. No sudden maneuvers, no unnecessary throttle changes. He performs one last scan of the sky, above and behind. Clear. The bombers hold their structure as they approach safer airspace. Additional Allied fighters are faintly visible in the far distance, rejoining sectors. Howard remains slightly above the lead box until the final boundary of danger is passed. Then he begins to drift a little farther back, still covering, but allowing the formation to move ahead on its assigned route home. The cockpit feels smaller now, quieter, engine steady, course set west. Only then does the silence begin to settle. The channel crossing passed without incident. Landing procedures were routine. Flaps down, gear extended, engine temperatures stable. The Mustang rolled to a stop with no visible indication that it had just spent half an hour in sustained combat. On the ground, the scale of the engagement was not immediately clear. Debriefing began within hours. Intelligence officers from the United States Army Air Forces gathered pilots and bomber crews separately. They worked with maps, grease pencils, and time estimates. Headings were drawn, altitudes marked, attack directions noted. How many fighters? One officer asked. Howard removed his gloves slowly before answering. More than 30, he said. Possibly 40. Hard to say. They were layered. Other escort pilots confirmed they had been drawn away by separate engagements. No friendly fighters had been in immediate proximity to the bomber formation during the most intense phase. Bomber crews added detail. They were on us from above and straight ahead. There was one Mustang up top, just one. Reconciling numbers proved difficult. Gun camera footage confirmed several enemy aircraft damaged or destroyed. Bomber gunners claimed additional hits. Intelligence analysts avoided exaggeration. The final estimate remained cautious. Several dozen German fighters engaged over approximately 30 minutes of sustained combat. Such a duration, with a single fighter maintaining continuous top cover against numerically superior opposition, was rare. Reports moved up the chain of command. Weeks later, the formal process concluded. The recommendation reached Washington. The award was the Medal of Honor. The ceremony itself was controlled and brief. Dress uniform, formation present. The medal's blue ribbon and gold star carried physical weight when placed around his neck. The citation summarized conspicuous gallantry, intrepidity, and skill far above the call of duty, emphasizing the defense of the bomber formation despite overwhelming odds. There was no theatrical display. Howard stood at attention. When later asked how he viewed the action, he did not describe it as heroism. He described it as responsibility. The bombers were assigned to us. He stated in one interview, "You don't leave them." Among bomber crews, the memory was practical rather than dramatic. They remembered the diving fighters, the smoke, the way the formation held together when it might have fractured. Several crews later credited the sustained top cover with preventing heavier losses. Historians who reviewed the mission logs decades later treated the engagement carefully. They avoided inflated numbers. They noted that air combat claims on both sides were often imprecise. What remained consistent across records was the duration, the isolation, and the effect on the bomber formation's survival. The event did not alter the entire air war. It did not end German resistance. But in that sector, on that January day in 1944, one pilot maintained position long enough for a formation to pass through the most dangerous airspace intact. The numbers matter. 30 minutes, approximately 25,000 feet, dozens of enemy aircraft, limited ammunition, declining fuel. But beyond the numbers is a narrower fact: discipline under pressure, the choice not to pursue when pursuit would have been easier, the decision to measure time instead of victory. Howard returned to combat afterward. The war continued, missions accumulated, losses continued on all sides. The medal did not change the mechanics of air warfare. It did not make the next mission safer. What remains is the record: a single fighter above a formation, a pilot who calculated angles, fuel, and seconds instead of glory, a defense sustained not by impulse but by restraint. Time in combat is rarely remembered in minutes. That day, it was 30 minutes that could have unfolded differently, 30 minutes in which a formation did not collapse, 30 minutes in which one pilot chose not to leave. The story endures not because of spectacle, but because of steadiness. If you value carefully researched World War II, history told without exaggeration, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It helps us continue documenting events where discipline, not drama, shaped the outcome. Some moments in history are loud. This one was defined by control, and by a pilot who remained where he was needed.